This is best described as about 20 years of anger distilled down into knowledge. Mainly because I've been doing this for so long. At this point, when we go through the same problems over again, it's like PTSD, but without the bullets. So of Sandcastles and luck is I say rethinking vulnerability management. That may be a bit generous. It may be just actually finally thinking about vulnerability management. A little bit about, anybody know who I am? It has been a while since I've done some public speaking. So Rafal, I'm currently the Vice President Chief Security Strategist of a company here locally that nobody has ever heard of, even though we've been around for about 20 years, called Lightstream. Anybody know us? What, two? Yes! Oh, we do wonderful marketing. But now you know us, okay? We're just up the street in Salt Lake City. I host the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. I have owned that for 10 years. We are in the top 1.5% of all podcasts globally. That's awesome. I'm almost as cool as Joe Rogan, but with more hair. Wow, tough crowd. Okay. There we go. You guys woke up. Okay, Joe Rogan jokes. Got it. I've been in the industry roughly 25 years, although it wasn't cybersecurity back then. If you are a Pix 2U series with a floppy drive old, raise your hand. My people. Okay. Right? So that's what we did. We installed things physically, and they were big, and they had fans. All right. I will give you guys a brief history of time as I see it, relevant to this. You're welcome to ask questions, make snide comments, and or laugh. The laughter is always better in the morning. And so, vulnerability management. Early 1990s, we had BugTrack and FD. Anybody remember those? Yikes. Okay, they still exist. Seclist.org, I think, still has it. And that was what we called winning, okay? That's where we got our vulnerability information. That's where we got it. We moved down to the 2000s, and we had remote vulnerability scanning. It was awesome. It was revolutionary, but we used spreadsheets, and that sucked. But we were eventually going to get over that, right? And then that brought us rejoicing. Name the movie. Thank you. Love it. This is going to be good. If you guys don't understand the reference, Monty Python and the Holy Grail will be the greatest thing you've ever seen, or you will hate it more than life itself. Figure out which, okay? It's like a side of the room you have to pick at some point. All right, moving on to the 2010s. We did remote vulnerability scanning in addition to local vulnerability scanning, but we still had spreadsheets, and that is inexplicable. I'm not quite sure why spreadsheets lasted that long, but the good news is in 2020s, we've got remote, we've got local, we've got vulnerability management tools, and damn it, we're still stuck in spreadsheets. This is the source of my rage, okay? This is why I said this is about 25 years distilled down into a talk of some knowledge, because I don't understand why spreadsheets arguably are the universal tool for everything we do. However, they are terrible for what we're trying to accomplish, okay? So there are three unfortunate trends around here, all right? The first one is, if you're playing along at home, yes, we are primarily focused on spreadsheets, and that is a terrible, terrible pox on us all, because if you've ever tried to do spreadsheet hell, and what I mean by that is you create a spreadsheet, you create a really good table, you send it to somebody, and then they send it to somebody, and you get it back, and you don't know what's changed, or why half the tables are now, or half the rows are now missing, right? It's not a way to run a railroad. The second one is, when we say vulnerability management, by and large, most people in enterprise security think patch management. Yes or no? Raise your hand for yes. Okay, the rest of you are either fooling yourselves or working at a better company than I've worked with. That's good. Well, one of those is good. Vulnerability management tends to be, hey, how many patches do we have missing? And while that's not great, it's better than one reply I got about 4 or 5 months ago. Smallish company, about 300 people. I was told that they have all of their laptops have auto update on, so they don't need to do vulnerability management because they don't exist. That's one of those conversations where you go, okay, thank you, have a great day. Because there's not really a better answer to that. The third part of this, and this may surprise you, there is crap for accountability out there, okay? Excellent. One of my best friends from high school is actually the writer on this show, and it's awesome. Some of the ideas that are coming next are fantastic. So there's crap for accountability. There really is, right? We scan, we dump the spreadsheet, we email out. Sometimes it gets fixed. Sometimes it doesn't. Who gets it? What happens to it? No idea, right? So faced with the lack of fundamentals, right, because we can't do the basic things right, like track to closure, we can't track how to SLAs and stuff like that, we've decided that the way to solve that is by adding complexity. Good. So, yes, we've decided we're going to add complexity. And the truth is, IT has evolved. They do that to me every once in a while because they know I hate this movie. So IT has evolved, skipping through. So long ago, there were a handful of stationary assets, right? There was low entropy, which means there was a very low volume of change, a rate of change. You had a couple of choices. You could be Windows 95 or Windows NT. Some of you still are. See, that's a nervous laugh. I was at a doctor's office for one of my kids' appointments recently, and they whipped out a workstation with Windows XP on it. Yeah, I bet that's HIPAA compliant. I mean, you know. The good news, though, is there's probably no current exploits for that. I mean, and there are a few applications. So look, when I started this in this industry, we had desktops. Everybody didn't carry laptops or their entire corporate IT infrastructure on one of these devices. And so it wasn't too bad. But the problem is it was still hard, right? Because you had to chase people down individually. You had to go, okay, there wasn't Patch Tuesday. It was Patch Every Day. And responsible disclosure, arguably still not solved, but, it was an idea at least. And so the problem is today we have mobile assets. How many of you guys have fully mobile workforces? Okay. How many of you guys are planning on doing that? Yeah. I have news for you. This pandemic is going to make everybody fully mobile or reasonably mobile at some point, right? We have cloud. That means anybody with a credit card in your organization now creates infrastructure. That's cool. We have varied OSs because there are 7,000 flavors of Linux and now apparently 3,200 flavors of Windows, and Mac OS is working hard to catch up. And we have a massive amount of applications. We have high entropy. And so you look like one of these characters where you're running around, your hair is on fire, and I have too many conversations that start with, I have too many things I don't know about. And there was a wise military general, I believe, that said, it's not the unknowns that'll kill you, it's the unknowns that you don't know about that'll kill you, the unknown unknowns. Because there's the only thing that's worse than a system that you know is insecure is the 17 that you don't know about. And that's where a lot of our breaches come from. So I've got some bad news, right? This is going to keep getting worse. We are past the point where IT is going to be, somebody said, well, we can just rein in IT. I have news for you. That's not a thing, okay? When in 30 seconds or less, you can stand up 10,000 virtual systems, reining in is not something you're going to be doing. So the good news is there's a peek behind the curtain, or I don't know, it's symbolic, whatever. So I'll give you guys a couple of things that might help, some things I've learned, and some things that are counterintuitive. I think step one is think outside the patches box. We have to absolutely get outside of our own comfort zone where we've been. Vulnerability management is not missing patches, right? It's a lot of other things. How many of you guys incorporate cloud security posture management into vulnerability management? How about any pen testing results, bug bounty programs, your AppSec, right? All of those are vulnerabilities. And yet, it's very difficult to put them all in the same, because the data sets don't look the same. They don't act the same. It's hard to, when you look at the CVSS, it's hard to say, okay, what's the CVSS score of a SSH session that's got 0000 for access in AWS? Anybody? No idea, right? It's whatever you determine it to be. The other thing is tracking and reporting is thing that we figured out the reporting part. That was easy. We've started recognizing what tracking is, but accountability is a foreign language. Accountability, and a long time ago, a CISO that I greatly admire, that is now heading up one of the largest companies in the world globally, taught me this. If somebody in the company says, yeah, we're going to accept that risk, and you just nod along and say, okay, unless they are an executive or a officer of the company, I have news for you. They didn't accept the risk, you did. Because that falls back to you. They don't have legal standing to do that. Okay? There are issues that go into this. And the one that I think is the most important out of this, and even if you do everything else right, the lifecycle problem happens. I'll get back to this in a minute. So none of this is easy. Absolutely 0.0% of this is easy. But I'm going to walk you through the major parts of the vulnerability management monster in the next couple here. And I'll give you kind of where I think we're missing, where I think things should change, and what I think the high points are. Again, slides will be available, recording this. I'm happy to chat with anybody if you've got questions. If you've got snarky replies or anecdotes, just raise your hand. I'll call on you or shout it out. This is best when somebody either disagrees or agrees or both. So, like I said, I hate preaching. So let's start with identification, because unknown unknowns suck. That is a fact. How do we define vulnerability? Anybody? Yo. Okay. Anybody else? A weakness. All right. So that's a good word. So in a large company I used to work for, rhymes with BE, we defined the definition of cyber vulnerability as any weakness in an organization's IT infrastructure that could compromise business operations. The part that very rarely gets included is that business operations part, okay? Because we look at let's say very basically, we're looking at a patch, right? Patch Tuesday comes around, it gets rated at a 99.99 on their badness scale. Everybody goes, oh crap, I got to patch this, and you go, okay, what's the impact to the business to this? Very rarely do we look at that, and that's a problem. So we have, right, there's three basic parts of vulnerability management in organizations. There's the actual patching stuff, OS and applications from scanning identification. There's application security itself, and you identify those in the SAS, DAS, RAS, static application testing, dynamic testing, runtime testing, code review, all the other development, design, all the other pieces. And then there's cloud configuration, right? Cloud account exposures and errors are a big deal. There's a Gartner stat that says in the next couple of years, something like 90% or some stupidly high number of problems in cloud will be ID 10T errors. No? Nobody? Okay. That means a problem exists between the keyboard and the, it's an interface problem, let's put it that way, right? So we can scan and identify everything. If you've got a handle on your cloud implementation, it's possible to see everything even though they don't tell you about everything, right? You can hook into VPC Flow and literally see every piece of traffic that goes by and identify unique systems. You can do that on Azure, you can do that on AWS, I'm pretty sure you can do that on GCP. It's really hard to do that in a mobile workforce with laptops that works from home because they can plug their own laptop in. Or they can, at one point I worked for a company that had this really brilliantly staunch security posture that all laptops were locked down. You could not install anything but corporate software on it, which means that if you were going to travel like I do for a living every week, you had to carry 2 laptops. So I solved it because everything that we did could be accessible through a web interface. I left my work laptop at work and just did everything in a web browser on my personal. I win. And yet, right, visibility sucks. So look, just because you don't see it and and choose not to acknowledge it, right? It's hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. It doesn't work. There's also a really good graphic of a person with their head in the sand, but this is, wow, what was that? Hi, can we turn those off? Thanks.
Did someone touch the back of the room?
Somebody's playing with lights. Good times. All right, wow. Suddenly I'm blinded. All right, well, hopefully you guys are still here. Mapping your attack surface is extremely important. So you've got to work really hard to figure out what's out there, what versions it is, what it's doing, and work really, really hard not to be surprised, okay? The first couple of identification scans you do to find new things, okay, is this on? Where did I drop off? Wow. Probably right around the time the lights went squirrely. Cool. Okay, well, I'll hold the mic. Can you turn it up just a little bit? Can you get a little gain in my microphone? I feel like Eminem. Okay. So, yes, I think there's plenty of room in the organization for business impact to be done on either side of the aisle. The problem is this is a more fundamental issue because IT security teams tend to be, if you're under the CTO, you tend to be an ops team. Security tends to be a SOC. That's not the right place to try to do a BIA because it's the wrong skill set for the people that work there. Okay? People that understand bits as they fly by do not have the same skill set, broadly speaking. I'm sure there's exceptions, to understand the impact of any particular group of systems or system to the bottom line of a business. It's a different skill set. So I think it's still if you take your security team and you split it between engineering and architecture and operations, within engineering and architecture, you create either a super team or a adjacent team, which is sort of your IT risk function. I think that's probably the best place for it. I mean, if anybody have a group that does BIA, and where does it live? Yeah, I heard. Okay, one more time. Compliance. Okay, that means you're adjacent to lawyers. I can see that. Anybody else? You have a formal risk function? That's fantastic. There's like 2% of companies in the world that have that. If you're lucky enough to have that, that's fantastic. Again, adjacent to lawyers, great. You know, there's an old joke that one of my old CEOs used to tell, and he's like, most people think that the CEO runs the company. That's not true. It's the lawyers. If you've ever tried to deny a legal team their budget, you'll quickly understand where the power center of the company is. Depends. All right. Data sensitivity is a big deal, too. Not all data is created equal, obviously. How many of you guys know the never-before-seen thing that Ranum used to talk about? Marcus Ranum? Anybody? Oh, God, Marcus. People have forgotten you already. He created this thing. He talked about how a long time ago he travels a lot, and he'd have a security system on his house, but it was fruitless to put one on his door or on his doors or windows because he lived in a kind of a secluded area, and his neighbors would often just walk into his house because that was that kind of neighbors, right? So it makes no sense. And he's got animals that would use a doggy door and whatnot. And sometimes people, he'd be like, hey, I locked my house accidentally. Just go through the window. It's fine. I leave them unlocked. So it's a terrible way to do that. What he did say was most of his animals and guests don't dig through his humidor or his fridge. So that's where he put the alarms on. He's like, because my cat's not allowed to smoke my cigars. That's fair. Unless it's Heathcliff. Yeah, I made that joke. I am that old. Saturday morning cartoons, baby. But looking at all the things that you've never seen before, right? And so really the more you know about this identification problem, remember that? Right? The more things you know about this identification problem, the more you recognize that scanning alone your IP space, your applications doesn't solve the problem, right? We need better tools. There are lots of tools out there that do attack surface mapping, and there's like 17 variations of this, I think. But think about what is all the IP space you own? IT usually knows. What about all the domain area space that you own? Maybe. Or maybe you have somebody in the marketing department that decided they needed to stand something up really quick, and they use their email on godaddy.com to register a domain. How are you going to find that? Pretty sure I don't want to work for you. Yeah, or that, right? If you're one of those companies, yes, you stand up customer attendance all day long. Stuff like that exists, right? So next step, moving on to what we call as triage. What is triage? Anybody? Triage? Initial assessment. And some of us carry that through, because triage by definition is that first blush, first analysis, right? I tend to condense that because if we extrapolate into too many steps, it gets too difficult. So I call it the step between identification and remediation. I identify something, I go, oh crap. I go, okay, it's not so bad. I've looked at it from different angles. It's not so bad. Now I know what to do with it. So for me, it's the bridge between I identify something and I decide what I'm going to do about it. So here's the thing. There are entirely too many orgs that skip this. And usually they rely on tools. And what did we say about tools already? Right? They don't solve problems. So what happens is you scan, you dump into a, God help us, vulnerability management platform. It then tells you this one's more important, this one's next important, and that one's third important. The problem is that's not how they actually work. What they do is they look up CVSS and some other magic, and then they tell you these 1,700 are the most important. Cool, bro. Let me know how that works out. Because you can't give somebody in IT 1,700 things to do. You can't give them 10 things to do, right? So distilling that, and I believe triage is still a human-driven process. That does not mean that there's no room for automation. There absolutely is. Just like if you're talking about threat hunting, you need the automation to bring you context, and then the person looks at it and makes a mental decision, right? I'm glad there's nobody that's, as of now, trying to sell AI as a vulnerability management thing, because that's when I know I'm getting off the bus. You're not gonna. Okay, fine. I'll go do that later. I will refill my cup and go through the vendors later, and we can go make fun of them together. By the way, somebody asked me why I went to work for a vendor if I rag on them so much. That's exactly why I went to work for a vendor, because we all suck and I want to make it better. So look, we want to add context to raw findings, right? You scan, you find a patch missing, you find an issue where RDP is open to the world. Cool, that's a great idea. Now what? When is critical not? I've asked that question in a million rooms and in a million times, and the answer is context. When is critical not? Do I need to turn up the mic or talk closer to it? This is how they get you. They make you talk super close to the microphone. And that's sultry voice. No. All right. So when is critical not? Ooh, that's good. So critical is not critical when you have context added to it. There's plenty of times in AppSec where a SQL injection vulnerability that can expose the entire database that's behind a cert-based auth or a key-based auth that 3 people have access to is not critical anymore. Mitigating controls, right? So we want to assess the context. We want to give it asset context and data context. What is the asset? How does it relate to, is it a dev server? Is it a workstation? Does it belong to somebody in finance? We used to say, is it an admin or a secretary's workstation? And then we discount it and say, yeah, those don't have a whole lot of data. Wrong. As somebody's already said today, right? That's the easiest way to get on everybody's workstation. Because generally speaking, they have access to everybody's calendar, everybody's email box, and everything else. You want business context. That's where BIA comes in. And I say, how many of you guys do business impact analysis in workshops at companies? I go, how do you do business impact analysis here? And I sort of get this, what? Like, well, you just told me you have a mature vulnerability management program, but you don't have business impact analysis at any level. So one of those two things is a lie. And I have news for you. CVSS by itself is not the entire equation. Right? If that's what you're using for determination, I feel bad for you. Because it's a contextless way of looking at a problem. If all flat tires are bad, that means the flat tire on the expressway at 9 a.m. when there's people zipping by at 90 is the same as a flat tire in your driveway at 2 a.m. when you're not in the car. And we know that's not right. So at a minimum, when you're looking at triage formulas, is an exploit published? Is there exploit code? Right? That's generally, if it's not, is it exploitable? A missing patch for something that's not exploitable may or may not matter to you. Okay, for context, do you guys remember why can't I think of it right now? The processor bug in Intel. Spectrum? No. Yes? Spectrum and Meltdown, right? Everybody freaked the hell out about it. It became the thing that everybody was concerned about. Everybody wanted patches for. Never mind that you had to try to patch a piece of silicone. But people were demanding patches. You know where the biggest impact, the companies that actually should care about this? Anybody you have a guess? Data centers. Because the patch was going to take about 25% performance out of the processor. So you know who should really care? Amazon, Microsoft, Google, IBM, Oracle, and other irrelevant clouds. Sorry, I used to work for HP. I know what that's like. And the reality is, it was super hard to exploit. And yes, eventually there were exploits that were less than impossible. But it was freaked everybody out. Every board was talking about, oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to patch this? And for 98% of companies out there, the answer was, am I really concerned about this? Is the exploit being exploited? Is it actively being exploited? Published exploit code is not the same as circulating exploits. Okay? Usually it used to be like, oh, there's like a 90-day window. Now there's like a 90-second window. But because we've thrown people at the problem and money is now a thing. Can it impact your business process? If you're Facebook and there's an exploit somewhere, I'm not saying this happened. I'm just saying I'm going to use this as an example, right? And somebody figures out that they can screw up your network in such a way that your auth and no other systems can talk to each other, and you know that it locks you not only out of the building, but out of all the systems, and the systems out of other systems. That's a bad way to go. That's a rough day, weekend, week, month. Does it impact business process? Yeah, I'd say so. So how many, there's a word that my marketing person invented, complificate. I love it because it's nonsensical. It's not a word, but it's funny. And it explains exactly what I'm trying to say here. There are so many ways to complicate things, right? We can create abstract, massive risk formulas that take 25 inputs that look at 17 dimensions of any vulnerability. Is this even relevant to the kind of business that you do? Will it help you get to a decision faster? And can you defend that decision to somebody that says this system has an outage window of 15 seconds a year? So some ideas. First, I say go simple. Complexity is the enemy of all. The more complex something is, the more likely it is to be broken, the more likely it is to be rejected, the more likely it is for somebody to look at it and go, yeah, I'll try to understand that sometime about this time next year. Over time, adding additional context. So maybe you start with, CVSS plus, is it being exploited? But you got to normalize. So not everything has a CVSS score. So then what? Speed is essential. How often do you guys scan your networks? Okay, weekly. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. That's a good one. Actually, that's a good formula. Did you guys hear that? It's based on a criticality window. So if something is critical, you've got 3 days to patch, so they scan every 3 days. That's a good way. Somebody else said something? Anybody say continuously? That guy. Continuously is awesome. But when the output is 17,000 lines in a spreadsheet and it takes you a week to analyze, continuous isn't helping. Right? It's all about finding the needle in the stack of needles. It really is. So you're looking at automation, some form of automation that makes sense, that doesn't overcomplicate things, but also gives you the necessary context. A way to bring business impact in, which means, I'm going to use my favorite thing, means at some point you've threat modeled. Who's done a threat modeling exercise here? Please, everybody raise their hands. Okay, what is this? Is like I tried and I failed, or I've read about it once. Anybody who's done threat modeling? Okay, that's a couple. That's better than usual. If you don't threat model, odds are you don't know what the importance of anything is in your environment or what its impact is on things around it, which makes it really hard to score things. And if you can't score things, you're guessing. And if you're guessing, you may as well be doing magic. And if you're doing magic, it's bullshit. Pardon my French. So you do triage, right? Okay, so then what? Then we talk about mitigation. And mitigation generally means, all right, just go fix it, right? I scanned it, I found some vulnerabilities, go fix them. How hard could it be? What's our role in the organization as a security person? What's your job? What do you do? What's our role in the organization? All right. We're advisors, right? So let's keep that in mind as we go through this. Your role as an advisor is important. So when you're looking at mitigation, I'm going to go back to this. When we look at mitigation, we want to get the deer out of the headlights. We want to do something. There's a term that we coined a long time ago called analysis paralysis. Right? Anybody heard this? Where you spend so much time doing analysis, you can't really figure out how to move forward because it just requires more analysis, and then you get more data inputs and you do more analysis, and by the time you've made a decision, you're already dead. Every slasher movie ever. Although they always pick going into the basement. Now Geico's made an awesome commercial about it. Why can't we just get in the running car? Duh, let's go hide behind the chainsaws. We're in the basement. Always. So if our role is to advise, option one is to mitigate, actually fix things, right? Fix it, Felix? Who's got kids? I see you. Okay, so it's apply a fix. So mitigate is two things. You can apply an actual fix, apply the patch, make the change, go slap your developer on the back of the head and said, no more RDP to the world. Unfortunately, that usually requires a boot, but sometimes more. Somebody's old head of development used to say the success of this project depends on your execution. I laughed because he didn't understand the hilarity of that moment. So you can apply the fix, or there's an or. I know, shocked face. I love that squirrel. That squirrel has been in so many presentations, it's not even funny. I should owe that squirrel royalty. You can also apply mitigating control. Perfect example. I was talking to a friend a while back, and it's been a couple years, probably about 4 or 5 years. I had him on the podcast. We were talking about things that are ultra legacy, right? Things that are so old, most people don't, they don't make patches for them or whatever. And I was like, yeah, man, there's probably still some NT4 boxes around. And he looked at me and said, that's adorable that you think that's old. Now, he worked for one of the top 6 U.S. banks, so keep that in mind. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, dude, I still run Fox Pro for payroll. Those of you that laugh, why is that funny? When did Fox Pro go out of circulation? Like 98? Right? So 20 years later, roughly, we're still doing, payroll on it? That's awesome. But a mitigating control around these things. Sometimes you can't apply the fix because A, it doesn't exist. Or it involves, like a couple of jobs ago, a wrecking ball to go through a building and level the things that were in it. VMS VAX machines did not accept patches well. So the way we solved that is we ran a bulldozer through the building and installed NT instead. I'm not sure I fixed the problem, but it was fun. Applying mitigating controls is important because sometimes you can't solve it by applying the fix. Option 2 is defer. That means I could do this now, but something is it's either not a high enough risk, or my outage window is 3 months from now and it's only 20 minutes and I'm not going to do it today. Okay? It's the fix it later. It does not mean fix never. As quickly as it, because we put it in a spreadsheet someplace, right? Because that's our universal tool. And then we forget about it. It just disappears. It becomes the stuff of legend. Gather around campfires and glowing screens and we tell stories about it. And then all of a sudden, because when you analyzed it, there was no exploit available. There was no exploit code. 6 months later, it's being run by a worm and everything it touches explodes. And you're like, oh crap, do we have anything vulnerable to that? Remember when Heartbleed was a thing? You know why everybody panicked? I didn't understand the panic when Heartbleed came out. Because why wouldn't you know, because everybody scans their networks, why wouldn't you know where you have an old OpenSSL version? Oh, because we don't look at our networks that way. Right. Okay, in that case, panic extensively. There is an option 3. Anybody know what option 3 is? Accept. I will also accept drink heavily. So, my favorite person that in the just deal with it column, some companies will say, we will accept this risk. And that's okay. Because your role is to advise, not to necessarily tell them what to do, right? So you're advising, you go, this is going to jack the company completely. And they go, that's cool, but I'm not going to do that. And some project manager says, oh, we're just going to accept that risk. And you go, okay, no, don't do that. The way to solve this problem of things ending up in the do nothing ever, get to know the legal department, draft up a document to be able to accept a significant, now this means that you have to be able to document why something is a critical and why it has to be fixed. Okay, so that might be a prerequisite for some people, but once you have that, you go to legal and you go, okay, this is my document, how I advise, and when it's critical, this is why it's going to be critical, and I'm going to want somebody to sign off on that. They're going to go, great, bring it to me, I'll have to review it, and then it's going to have to go to whoever the VP of that department is. I did that many years ago, and my accept rate went from about 50% to about 0%. Because I've been in a CIO's office once with a project manager that decided that they're going to accept that risk. They did not expect the business unit's chief legal counsel to be in the room, or for that chief legal counsel to educate the CIO on why he thinks this is a terrible idea. It was a very short conversation. It ended with the phrase, get out of my office, what were you thinking? And we never had it again. Weird. It turns out people don't want to put their jobs at risk for something that could actually be done. Who knew, right? So you're going to want to take that thing that you accept, add it to the register. Do not forget about it. There's a song, Don't You Forget About Me by? What? No. You have to Google. What? Simple Minds. That's right, Sean. Thank you very much. Regularly review the defer and accept pile. Regularly review the defer and accept pile. And what I mean by that is go through them and look at them. If you've got some automation in place, that automatically adds context, right? Something that you could accept or defer because it was a priority 3 and it was down the stack and it's maybe low impact, but no exploit code. Suddenly, some brilliant young mind somewhere home on spring break realized that if you flip a bit, you can now own half the network with it. And that goes from it's okay to accept to, you need to fix that right now. But if you don't have this review process, if you don't have this written down someplace, it becomes really difficult to get there. Oh, by the way, if you have this stuff written down and you don't review it and you get popped by one of these, what you have done now is collected evidence against your own self. Because then you get to the point, well, you had all the data. Why didn't you make the decision to fix it? That's not a fun question to answer. So the recommendations change over time. What is a hungry caterpillar today is a pretty butterfly tomorrow, or the other way around, right? What ate my entire tomato plant one day is suddenly kind of pretty, and I can't kill it because my daughter likes it. And the tomato plant's dead anyway. So when context changes, advise and then track, which brings me to my favorite topic in this, which is reporting. This is accountability for dummies. I jokingly told Mark we were going to write a book on Vulnerability 101. It's just going to have accountability as the only word on every page, and that's it. Because that's the only thing that matters, right? If you don't have accountability, none of this other crap I've told you about matters. Because you can have great dashboards, you can have great triage, you can have 100% identification, you can know everything about your network, but if you don't have anybody that's accountable for fixing it, you are going to have a bad time, to quote South Park. There's multiple parts here. There's tracking, there's metrics, and there's accountability. So this isn't just about getting straight A's. This is not a race to zero vulnerabilities. Risk doesn't work that way. Okay, whether we're talking about a pandemic or we're talking about 0 days, risk does not go to zero just because you want it to. If you ever work in an organization, all right, take my info down, call me if you get there. If you ever get into an organization where you do a look around and your vulnerability list it has 0 on it, we should have a conversation about what your next job should be. Because my advice to you is run like hell. Because something's turned off. No such thing, I promise. So we want to track to service levels. Sean indicated earlier here about being able to, his scanning regimen goes along that line, right? So you've got priorities when your recommendation is fixed. P1, P2, P3, very simple. P1 is mission critical impact. I have another slide deck from a different talk that has this stuff in it. If you want that one, I think I posted that one to slideshare.net. It's from GSX from a couple weeks ago. But if it's a P1, it's mission critical business impact. It's demonstrable. I can show you that if this thing gets exploited, we cannot function as a company. That's it. We stop existing. If you ruin the BGP tables, Facebook falls off the face of the planet. That's it, done. That is a P1. A P2 is, it could have significant business impact, but I am not sure that it's going to be huge. It could, maybe is a key word, have significant business impact. And a P3 is, it looks like it's a problem. I don't think it impacts us. I do not reasonably believe that it impacts us. Or if it does get exploited, that it will cause any business impact. Right? Relate to the BIA again. So we track to resolution or we track to SLAs. Most companies track to resolution, declare victory, and move on. That's okay, but you have to be able to figure out a P1 usually within 24 hours, patch has to be applied, fix has to be applied. P2, standard is somewhere around 7 days. Calendar not working. A P3, somewhere within 30 calendar days. Right? A defer, you get 60 days and we'll come back to it. An accept gets, and the defer and accept get reviewed every 30 days thereafter or something. If you don't have a policy statement like that someplace, that should be the first thing you do. Because that helps you make the case. It helps you operationalize all this. Metrics report on either progress or risk. Which one do you think is easier? I'll give you a hint. Look at everybody walking around here in a mask, right? And then look at all the baseball stadiums where people sit a foot and a half away from each other screaming at the top of their lungs all day. Risk is super hard to understand and quantify and convey. Agree? Right? We're an industry that revolves everything we do around that little 4-letter word. So it's way easier to convey progress. I found 50, I patched 20 of them. Awesome. 2 out of 5. That's not bad. Next month I will patch 3 out of 5, then 4 out of 5, and then 4 out of 5, and then 2 out of 5. Wait, that's going backwards. Yeah, that happens. So progress is easy, but progress is also a liar. It does not tell you whether you're doing a good job or not, just means you're fixing stuff. It's kind of like if you've ever seen any of those stories on after a bridge collapses and injures a bunch of people someplace. Like, well, we did yearly upkeep on it. It was, we fixed every crack. Meanwhile, they're like, yeah, but the girders were 75 years old and rusted through. Well, good job. You were fixing 100% of things you found. You weren't looking at the important stuff. So metrics that report risk are tough. Those take a lot of time. Those require BIAs. Those require threat modeling. Those require significant work. But I promise you those are the most important. How much risk is in your environment? Break that down by business, line of business owner. Put it on a dashboard on a screen outside your CIO's office. It's great to watch business unit owners try to outdo each other for who's got the best number, because nobody wants to be in the red on that, right? Hey, why are you creating undue risk for the company? What is wrong with you? Accountability keeps you employed, because if monkey poo hits the fan, the first thing everybody in the company does is point at each other. Not my fault. Or they blame the intern. I love that one. That's a great one. Blame the one person in the company that has no accountability and does not get paid. Good job, dude. That's a sign of leadership. So when you find accountability, find somebody that can actually accept or make a decision, right? Do not own the decision. You are not paid enough to own the decision. I promise you that is not your choice to make. And they always say, look around the room. If you can't identify the sucker, it's you, right? So if you look around the room and everybody's saying, yeah, I can accept that risk, it's you. You're the only one that's going to get dumped on. All right, so path forward and some cool graphics. How do we get this plane off the ground? Because God help us, it has been 20 some odd years that we've been talking about this. And I feel like we pushed it off the cliff, and now like one of the engines is kind of working. The wing is sort of about to fall off. There's no guidance system. Both the pilots are drunk. Like, it's not a good situation. How do we get this thing off the ground? So I will tell you, remember the life cycle. Focus on a vulnerability management life cycle. Identify, triage, mitigate, report, and now for the one that nobody's going to get. Anybody? Pete and repeat? Fall Out Boy fans? One. And you didn't recognize him? He's not on a poster out in your bedroom. I don't know what to tell you. So it's Pete and repeat, right? Do those things over and over and over and over again. It is not a fun job if you don't know how to do it right. Get beyond patching and create a triage formula that's simple, that's effective. Yes, buy some automation. Don't rely on it. Find people that you can hold accountable. Find people that the company can hold accountable. Those people are generally not you. And what that means is make friends with lawyers, right? You're going to probably break some eggs and blow some people's houses over. That's okay. I'd rather be respected than liked. Typically, I say work backwards. Start at things that are not... Everybody's tendency is to find all the legacy vulnerabilities that have been there for 20 years and start trying to fix those first. Meanwhile, you've got a pipeline where you're creating new ones and ones that just came out of the pipeline. So I would say find the ones that are in the pipeline right now, because those actually have resources to do something. Then go to the ones that are just came out of the pipeline, because at least those are still fresh in somebody's mind. And then go look at the legacy stuff that was developed 25 years ago by people that are actually physically no longer with us. Finding a bunch of COBOL-based vulnerabilities in an app that's super critical to the company is not going to win you friends, because there's nobody to fix that. They have all died. I am not kidding. Anybody know COBOL here? I learned it back in college. Like, I know some Fortran and COBOL. Like, I know the structure. To write code, no thanks. There's a reason those jobs pay $500,000 a year right now. There's like 6 people in the world alive that still know it. Stick with current issues and work back to legacy, and then by all means, light some fires. When things are important, go light somebody's office on fire. Like, let them know you are going to be the source of the breach. I can show you why. I have documented it. It is going to be you they hold accountable. Because that's how we have to change the culture. It can't just be us out there going, hey, I found a bunch of vulnerabilities, go fix it, and nobody cares. Vulnerability management is the central port of any security operations in an organization. That's where the security program is made or broken. I can tell you everything I need to know about the rest of your security org by how well you manage vulnerabilities and how well that program runs. We've got to do a better job. It's got to start now, because the alternative is to continue this damn train wreck. That's why we have so many breaches. We get people that go, we didn't know that system existed and it hadn't been patched since 95. That is not an excuse. I'm sorry. One of our developers went out and hired or created 7,500 VMs that security didn't know about. Still your problem. So that's all I got. Thanks for coming. Again, if you guys listen to podcasts, I would invite you go take a listen to Down the Security Rabbit Hole. We're on. We just hit 10 years. We're starting to do some stuff with LinkedIn Live and live streams and stuff. It's a lot of fun. Breaking the 25,000 listener barrier. So that's what you guys are hopefully going to help me do, get over 25K. And if you're on Twitter, I'm the White Rabbit. And that's it. Thanks for coming.